I am Harper, 34 years old, and exactly 4 weeks ago, standing right in the middle of my wealthy father's grand retirement party, he crossed a line that finally forced me to burn my bridge to this toxic family forever. Just picture the scene, a blindingly bright country club ballroom, 250 wealthy guests dripping in sparkling diamonds and dark Prada suits, drinking freezing crystal champagne like it was tap water. My powerful father stood proudly on the wooden stage, holding the microphone tightly, introducing his perfect family one by one. When his sharp eyes finally locked onto me hiding in the dark back corner, he flashed that familiar chilling smile, the one that looked so incredibly warm to the cheering crowd, but sliced right through my chest like jagged glass. And of course my daughter, Harper, he announced loudly to the room. No real degree, no bright career, just freeloading off this family's hard work. 250 people erupted into cruel, echoing laughter, but I didn't flinch a single muscle. I didn't let a single hot tear fall. I simply stood up, slowly raised my crystal glass straight toward his face, and said, "Cheers, Dad, because this is the absolute last time any of you will ever see me." Then I turned my back and walked right out the giant double doors. Behind me, the entire cavernous room fell into a total, devastating silence. What exactly happened when the dust finally settled? That is exactly what I am here to tell you right now. Before we dive into the fire, please take one quick second to smash that like button and actively subscribe, but honestly only do it if you genuinely want to see how this empire crumbles. And while you are here, drop a comment below letting me know exactly where in the world you are watching from, and what time it is there. Now let me take you back 3 years ago to the day my grandmother was admitted to the hospital for the very last time. The phone call came at exactly 7:14 a.m. on a cold Thursday morning. "Miss Mitchell, this is Hanover General. Your grandmother, Martha Mitchell, has been admitted. Congestive heart failure." I was on a plane from Phoenix within 4 hours. The flight felt like an endless nightmare. The roaring engine couldn't drown out my racing heartbeat, and my hands absolutely wouldn't stop shaking. "Please hold on," I prayed silently, staring blindly out the window. "Just wait for me." Grandma Martha was 82 years old, but to me she had always seemed completely invincible. She wasn't just an old woman. She was the one who patiently taught my tiny hands how to plant red roses in the spring dirt. She was the safe harbor who held me tight against her chest while I cried myself to sleep at 6 years old, the exact night my own mother packed her bags and walked out the front door forever. The hospital smelled like harsh bleach and bad news. When I finally reached the cardiac wing, my boots echoing loudly on the tile, I stopped dead in my tracks. My mother was already there. Catherine Mitchell, 52 years old, perfect blonde highlights, a designer Burberry scarf draped flawlessly over her shoulders. She stood in the sterile white hallway, casually chatting with a doctor. She didn't acknowledge me, not a single glance, not even a tiny nod. I approached her slowly, my chest tight. "Mom, how is she?" Catherine finally turned her head. Her cold blue eyes swept over me from head to toe, looking at me like I was a dirty stain on the pristine wallpaper. "Oh, you came." Her voice was pure ice, sharp enough to cut glass. "I thought you were too busy with your little career to bother." I swallowed the heavy lump in my throat. "She's my grandmother. She's my mother," Catherine snapped, turning her back to me instantly. She dismissed my entire existence in 1 second. "As I was saying, doctor, I'll need copies of all her medical records right away." I tried again, desperation leaking into my voice. "Can I please just see her?" Catherine didn't even look over her shoulder. She spoke directly to the nervous nurse. "Only immediate family is allowed in right now. The patient needs absolute rest. In fact, we are in the middle of some very sensitive legal arrangements." The young nurse glanced between us, her face twisting with deep confusion. "Ma'am, isn't this—" "She's not immediate family." Catherine smiled. It was a razor-thin, cruel curve of her lips. "Not really." Those words hit my face like a physical slap. 21 years. I had spent 21 years being raised, loved, and fiercely protected by Grandma Martha, and my own mother had just calmly declared I wasn't real family. I stood completely frozen in that bright, awful hallway. I watched my mother's perfect silhouette disappear into my grandmother's room, but just as the heavy door swung shut, I caught a quick glimpse of what was actually happening inside. A strange man in a cheap gray suit stood right next to Grandma's bed. He was gripping a thick metal clipboard. A notary. Catherine wasn't here to hold her dying mother's hand. She was trying to force a helpless, sick woman to sign away her entire life. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing them inside. In that crushing silence, a heavy, ugly truth finally settled over my shoulders. To Catherine Mitchell, I had never been a daughter. I was just an inconvenience she had left behind. But as I stood there staring at the closed wood, I realized Catherine was about to make the biggest mistake of her life, because I wasn't a helpless 6-year-old anymore, and I was never going to let her destroy my grandmother in the dark. I waited in the cold waiting area until Catherine finally left for lunch. The exact moment I saw her step into the elevator, her hands gripping a thick stack of blank unsigned papers with white-knuckled fury. I moved. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slipped silently into Grandma's room. The space was dim, filled with the steady, quiet beeping of heart monitors, clear tubes and blinking wires wrapped around her frail, tired body. The machines seemed way too loud, too cruel for someone who had always been so incredibly gentle. She looked so helpless, I thought, a sharp ache hitting my chest. My whole world, fading into these white hospital sheets. But then, her tired eyes fluttered open. When her gaze finally found mine, her entire face lit up like the warm morning sun breaking through dark clouds. "Maya, my sweet girl," she whispered. Her voice was weak, rough like dry leaves, but filled with so much pure love. "You came." I rushed to her side and gently took her hand. Her pale skin felt thin, almost like tissue paper, but her fingers gripped mine with a surprising fierce strength. "Of course I came, Grandma. I'm right here." I fought back the heavy tears burning my eyes. "Don't." She paused, taking a shallow, shaky breath. "Don't believe a single word Catherine tells you about me. I am much sharper than she thinks." A tiny defiant spark danced in her eyes. "She brought a complete stranger in here today. She tried to force my hand on a new property deed. I pretended my vision was blurry. I acted like I couldn't see the signature lines." I squeezed her warm fingers, a mix of anger and absolute awe rushing through me. "I know. I saw him." Martha's gaze slowly drifted toward the window, looking at something far away. "The room," she murmured softly. "Walter's room. Remember, Maya, if you ever need real answers, go there." I frowned, completely lost. Walter was my grandfather. He had died long before I was even born. I had heard old stories about his grand study, but I had never seen a hidden room anywhere in our big mansion. "Grandma, I don't understand what you mean." Before she could explain, the heavy door swung violently open. Catherine stood frozen in the doorway, a paper coffee cup trembling in her grip. Her icy blue eyes locked instantly onto our intertwined fingers. The air in the room grew instantly freezing. "What exactly are you doing in here?" she demanded, her voice carrying a sharp, dangerous edge of accusation. I stood up taller, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "I am visiting my grandmother." Catherine ignored me and turned sharply to the nervous nurse who had quickly followed her inside. "Do you see this?" Catherine pointed a furious finger at me. "This is exactly what I warned you about. She is always trying to isolate my sick mother from our real family. This is textbook elder manipulation." The nurse's expression shifted immediately. She looked at me differently now, her eyes full of cold suspicion. The trap was set. I opened my mouth to defend myself against the ugly lie, but Grandma Martha squeezed my hand hard. It was a silent, desperate warning. "Stay calm. Don't fight her here." I swallowed my burning anger. "I was just leaving," I said quietly, stepping away from the bed. As I walked slowly past Catherine toward the bright hallway, my mother leaned in close. Her expensive perfume made me sick to my stomach. She murmured something incredibly soft, meant only for my ears. "I've recorded everything, Maya. Absolutely everything." Those threatening words made zero sense to me in that confusing moment. What could she possibly have recorded? But I was about to find out that this twisted family game was much deeper and far more dangerous than I ever imagined. 4 agonizing days crawled by. Then in the absolute quiet of an early Tuesday morning, Grandma Martha passed away softly in her sleep. I was sitting right beside her, tightly holding her fragile hand when it finally happened. The harsh green lines on the heart monitors flatlined at exactly 4:15 a.m., blaring a long, terrible alarm. Medical staff rushed into the room, boots squeaking on the shiny floors. But I already knew she was gone. Her warm grip had gently slipped away. The bright, loving light behind her kind eyes had faded into darkness. "She's really gone," my mind whispered, a hollow, suffocating ache tearing through my chest. The only real parent I ever had. My anchor is gone. Catherine arrived 3 whole hours later. 3 hours. When she finally burst through the heavy hospital doors, she was fully dressed in dramatic mourning attire. A perfectly tailored black dress, expensive dark sunglasses pushed up on her styled blonde hair. She let out a loud theatrical wail and collapsed practically onto the cold floor next to the empty bed. "Mama, oh Mama, I'm so incredibly sorry I wasn't here," she sobbed fiercely, clutching the wrinkled white sheets. "I should have been here. I should have." Her fake performance was entirely flawless. The morning nurses exchanged deeply sympathetic glances. A young nervous orderly rushed over to bring her a box of tissues. I stood silently in the corner, completely numb, watching her squeeze out forced tears. What was there even left to say to a woman who treated her own mother's death like a Hollywood stage play? Exactly 2 weeks later, the heavy reality of the situation hit us. We all gathered inside the grand law offices of Harrison Jenkins for the official reading of the will. The large room smelled intensely of polished wood, thick legal books, and much older money. The ticking of a tall grandfather clock in the corner sounded exactly like a steady countdown to a massive explosion. Around the giant mahogany conference table sat Catherine and her current husband, Robert Clark. He was a former real estate broker who constantly darted his nervous eyes around the room. Robert kept twisting his gold wedding ring, sweat beading on his pale forehead despite the cool air conditioning. Aunt Penelope, Catherine's quiet younger sister, sat stiffly in a dark corner, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. A few distant, greedy cousins I barely recognized eagerly filled up the remaining leather seats. Harrison Jenkins was 68 years old, sporting neat silver hair and the incredibly calm energy of a man who had survived every single kind of messy family drama. He had been Grandma Martha's personal trusted attorney for 25 long years. He adjusted his glasses, carefully cleared his throat, and slowly began to read the final document. "I, Martha Evelyn Mitchell, being of completely sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath." The stuffy room grew dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Catherine leaned forward eagerly, a greedy, expectant glimmer shining in her cold eyes. "My primary residence at 924 Whispering Pines Court, valued at $5.4 million, along with all its precious contents." Harrison paused slightly, his steady gaze briefly meeting mine. "To my granddaughter, Maya Alice Mitchell." The tense silence instantly shattered into a million pieces. Catherine's ceramic coffee cup slipped from her frozen hands and smashed violently onto the hardwood floor, hot liquid splashing everywhere. But the stunning shock of that grand $5.4 million house was absolutely nothing compared to the tiny, humiliating detail Harrison was about to read next. A single brutal sentence that would officially launch an unstoppable family war. Harrison looked down at the final page of the thick document. The tense silence in the room was so incredibly heavy it felt hard to breathe. "And to my biological daughter, Catherine Penelope Mitchell Clark." He took a slow, deliberate breath, his steady gaze never leaving the paper. "I leave the sum of exactly $5. $5. The words hung in the stale, air-conditioned room. It was a supreme, final insult. Grandma Martha hadn't simply forgotten her daughter. By leaving a tiny, specific amount, she had legally and permanently rejected her. It was a brilliant, unbreakable move. Catherine erupted like a violent volcano that had been boiling underground for decades. "No." She slammed both of her manicured palms onto the heavy mahogany table so hard the expensive wood shuddered. "This is an absolute fraud." Harrison remained perfectly still, his face an unreadable professional mask. "Mrs. Clark, I must ask you to please." "Don't you dare Mrs. Clark me." Catherine whirled toward me like a wild, cornered animal. Her pointed finger jabbed the air just inches from my face. "You, what sick lies did you feed her? What poison did you whisper in her ear while she was drugged up and dying in that hospital bed?" My heart pounded a frantic, terrifying rhythm against my ribs. But I forced my chin up. "I won't let her break me," I told myself. I kept my voice dead level, refusing to show her a single ounce of fear. "I didn't do a thing, Catherine. Grandma made her own choices." She saw the truth. "Liar." Spittle flew from her trembling lips. Robert finally reached out, his face pale and shining with panicked sweat. He tried to pull his furious wife back into her leather seat. She shook him off so violently, he actually stumbled backward against the wall. My mother had severe dementia. She was completely out of her mind. She didn't know what she was signing. Harrison spoke again, his calm tone slicing smoothly through her loud screaming. "Mrs. Mitchell was thoroughly evaluated by her primary physician just days before this draft was created. She was of perfectly sound mind when her physician." Catherine let out a sharp, ugly bark of laughter that made the tiny hairs on my arms stand up. "Who? Some fake doctor she paid off?" She pointed at me again, her blue eyes burning with pure, unhinged hatred. "Or maybe someone this pathetic little gold digger bribed with my family's money." My family, I thought bitterly. Never mine, always hers. In the shadowy corner of the room, Aunt Penelope shifted very uncomfortably. I looked at her, silently begging her to defend our grandmother's honor, but Penelope kept her mouth tightly shut. She stared at the floor, terrified of her older sister's wrath. The distant cousins simply exchanged wide-eyed, greedy glances, secretly enjoying the free, dramatic entertainment. Realizing she was losing her grip on the room, Catherine suddenly changed tactics. She turned away from me, throwing her arms spread wide, playing the desperate, heartbroken victim to her captive audience. "My mother loved me deeply," she cried, squeezing out a fake, trembling tear. "She would never ever cut her own flesh and blood out of her will. This girl," her voice dropped, dripping with toxic venom as her eyes locked onto mine, "manipulated a senile, helpless old woman. This is clear elder abuse. This is illegal coercion. The will is 100% legally valid," Harrison stated firmly, tapping the thick stack of papers. "Witnessed by 2 independent parties, properly notarized, and officially filed with the state." Catherine stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. She slowly straightened her spine, smoothing the wrinkles from her designer jacket. The fiery rage vanished from her face, replaced instantly by something much worse. When she spoke again, her voice had gone freezing cold, calculated and deadly. "We will let the courts decide that, won't we?" She snatched her expensive purse from the table, her knuckles pure white. "I am contesting this garbage will. I will have it completely destroyed. And when I am finally done with you, everyone in this entire city will know exactly what kind of disgusting predator my supposed granddaughter really is." She paused right at the heavy oak door, looking back at me over her shoulder. Her smile was a terrifying slash that completely failed to reach her dead eyes. "See you in court, sweetheart." The massive door slammed shut behind her with the deafening force of a gunshot. The loud echo rang endlessly in my ears. I thought surviving my mother's screaming match was the hardest part of today, but I had absolutely no idea that her real weapon wasn't her anger. It was a dark, twisted secret that was about to destroy my entire life. After the massive explosion of my mother's rage, the grand conference room emptied out as quickly as if a bomb had just gone off. Robert hurried out the heavy oak door, practically running after Catherine without a single backward glance. The greedy, distant cousins mumbled weak, pathetic excuses and fled down the hallway like frightened mice. Only Aunt Penelope lingered behind. She approached my chair very hesitantly, nervously wringing her pale hands together. She wouldn't look me directly in the eye. "Maya, I really don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything at all, Aunt Penelope," I replied, my voice completely hollow. She glanced over her shoulder toward the open door, acting as if she were terrified Catherine might suddenly burst back inside and catch her talking to the enemy. "You have to understand. Catherine is my older sister. I have to stand by her side through this. You understand why I can't help you, right?" I understood perfectly. Blood over truth. Fake public appearances over actual painful reality. That was the official Mitchell family motto. "Of course," I said quietly, hiding the sharp sting of her betrayal. Penelope grabbed her purse and left without another single word, leaving me completely alone with the lawyer. Harrison Jenkins slowly began gathering his thick stacks of papers, carefully sliding them into his leather briefcase. "Miss Mitchell, I need you to know right now that this will be an incredibly difficult, nasty fight," he warned gently. "Catherine has heavy resources. She will drag this out for years if she has to. She has already made a secret deal with Valerie Stone, the absolute most ruthless litigator in the entire state. Catherine offered her a flat 40% cut of the estate if she wins. That makes Valerie as hungry and dangerous as a great white shark smelling fresh blood in the water." "I know," I breathed, feeling a cold chill run down my spine. "But the will is totally solid. You said it yourself. It is solid. Your grandmother made absolutely sure of that." He paused, studying my exhausted face with soft, grandfatherly eyes. "She loved you very much, Maya. More than anything." As I finally walked out of the stuffy law office, feeling totally drained, a thin, nervous man suddenly intercepted me in the dim lobby. It was Mr. Sterling, Grandma's longtime personal accountant. He looked completely sick. His gray suit hung loosely on his bony frame, and he had dark, bruised bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept a wink in weeks. "Maya, please," he whispered frantically, glancing around the lobby with pure paranoia. "You need to know the truth right now. The bank accounts, they're nearly empty." My blood instantly ran freezing cold. The ground seemed to tilt beneath my boots. "What do you mean empty?" "Over $2.5 million, Maya. Gone. Completely drained over the last decade." His hands shook violently as he spoke. I wanted to report it so badly. I begged your sweet grandmother to go straight to the police, but she just cried every single time. She told me, if I cut Catherine off, she will destroy Maya. She will make sure I never see my beautiful granddaughter again. She paid her own terrifying extortion money just to protect you. Tears pricked my eyes. Grandma had let herself be robbed blind, just to keep me safe. Mr. Sterling quickly pressed a small cold thumb drive into my sweaty palm, closing my fingers tightly over it. I secretly kept the hidden ledgers. All the proof is right here. Be extremely careful, Maya. Catherine will do absolutely anything to keep this buried. He rushed out the glass doors, disappearing into the crowded city streets. That night, I drove slowly to the massive estate alone. My mansion now, technically, though it certainly didn't feel like mine at all. It felt like Grandma Martha's gentle ghost still wandered the dark, quiet halls. I sat alone in her massive bedroom, surrounded by old dusty photographs. One picture instantly caught my eye. It was me at exactly 6 years old, sobbing uncontrollably in Grandma's loving arms. It was taken the exact day Catherine walked out. Suddenly my cell phone buzzed loudly on the nightstand, making me jump. It was an unknown number. The bright text message lit up the dark room. Miss Mitchell, I'm a private investigator. I've been hired by Catherine Mitchell to look into your past. Thought you should know. My stomach dropped into my shoes. A second message instantly followed. She's looking for any dirty secret to completely destroy your life. I stared blindly at the glowing screen. Who was this person? Why were they risking their job to warn me? Before my trembling thumbs could even type a reply, a third chilling message appeared. Watch your back closely. She's far more desperate than you can ever imagine, and she is coming for you right now. 3 agonizing weeks dragged by in complete isolation. Every single time a car drove past the giant iron gates of the estate, my chest tightened. Then, on a gloomy Tuesday afternoon, the official lawsuit finally arrived. A stern-faced courier walked up the long driveway and shoved a massive, heavy manila envelope into my trembling hands. I stood completely alone on the grand front porch, tearing the thick brown paper open. Inside rested a formal legal complaint, stamped by the Colorado Superior Court. Case number 2025, CV 11923. It boldly read, Catherine Penelope Mitchell Clark versus Maya Alice Mitchell, a mother suing her own daughter. It felt deeply, horribly unnatural. The typed allegations read exactly like a twisted horror novel, and Catherine had painted me as the ultimate monster. She formally accused me of undue influence over a mentally incapacitated elderly person. She claimed systematic isolation of Martha Mitchell from her biological family, financial exploitation, fraud, coercion. Page after terrifying page. Catherine confidently swore to a judge that my sharp, brilliant grandmother had severe Alzheimer's disease. She wrote that I had completely brainwashed her, cruelly forged her signature, and stolen millions. But my mother didn't just stop at financial crimes. She added a brand new, absolutely sickening lie to the official record. She told the court that I had violently, physically restrained my own grandmother to prevent her from leaving the house. She's trying to put me in prison. My mind screamed in pure panic. The lies were rapidly mutating into something purely evil. I dialed Harrison Jenkins immediately, my fingers slipping on the phone screen. I've already seen it, the lawyer answered. His deep tone was dead serious. This is going to be a vicious, bloody battle, Maya. 16 months minimum before a trial. Can she actually win this? I choked out, sinking weakly into Grandma's favorite floral armchair. Not if the honest truth matters. He sighed heavily. But truth in courtrooms rarely align perfectly. Valerie Stone is incredibly aggressive. Why is my mother doing this? I pleaded to the empty room. This level of hatred. It can't just be about the money. Harrison stayed silent for a long, heavy moment. Your grandmother and I discussed many difficult things over the years. She fully expected Catherine to explode exactly like this. Then why not just leave a simple letter explaining everything? I asked, completely frustrated. She did leave something behind, Harrison replied, choosing his words very carefully. But she insisted you must uncover it yourself, only when you were truly ready. Find what exactly? Do you remember hearing about your grandfather Walter's private study? My breath hitched sharply in my throat. Grandma whispered about it at the hospital. But I've lived here my whole life. There is absolutely no hidden study in this mansion. There is, Harrison stated firmly. You just haven't looked closely enough. Go up to the 3rd floor library. Find the 4th oak bookshelf. Look for a dusty book titled Foundational Truths. Click. The line went totally dead. But my mother didn't patiently wait for the slow legal system to ruin me. She launched a massive, toxic public offensive. By month 4, nasty rumors had poisoned every wealthy country club and glittering charity gala in Hanover County. According to the wealthy elite, I was a greedy predator, a cruel monster. I discovered her vicious whisper campaign the absolute hardest way possible. A cold, formal email from my landscape architecture firm popped up on a rainy Thursday morning. Dear Maya, we have received highly concerning information from an anonymous source regarding your personal conduct. Pending a full investigation, we are immediately placing you on unpaid administrative leave. I called my kind supervisor, Jessica, in a blind panic. Jessica, what on earth is happening? Her voice sounded incredibly strained, almost tearful. Someone called HR. They claimed you have severe psychological issues and that you are currently under investigation for massive financial fraud. But Maya, it wasn't just a random tip. Catherine personally reached out to the CEO of Sterling Innovations. They are our biggest corporate client. She told him directly that if our firm kept a known elder abuser on staff, they would pull their multi-million-dollar contract today. That is my own mother. She is lying to destroy me. This is illegal blackmail. I believe you, Maya. I really do, Jessica whispered miserably. But the senior partners are terrified. I'm so incredibly sorry. My hands are completely tied. That forced leave became a permanent termination exactly 3 weeks later. Desperate to survive, I quickly applied to 3 different landscape firms across the city. Every single one flatly rejected me within hours. A sympathetic former coworker finally called me late one night, revealing the brutal truth. Someone had been calling every firm ahead of my interviews, pouring poison into the water. She warned them, "You had a dark history of stealing from elderly clients," my friend whispered, sounding genuinely terrified. Catherine wasn't just trying to win a greedy lawsuit anymore. She was actively trying to erase my entire existence. By month 5, the intense pressure cooker was practically screaming. I was losing my savings, losing my reputation, and losing my mind. Right before our first mandatory settlement meeting, Robert suddenly ambushed me in the dark parking lot of a cheap grocery store. It was freezing cold outside, but he was sweating profusely, looking completely frantic. "Maya, please wait," he gasped, violently grabbing my coat sleeve. I yanked my arm back like he had burned me. "What do you want from me, Robert?" "I need a way out," he practically begged, his nervous eyes darting around the empty asphalt lot. "Catherine has gone totally crazy. She is illegally forging a brand new secondary will, Maya. She found a dirty notary willing to backdate it to make it look real. But I can stop her." He swallowed hard, looking genuinely terrified for his life. "I owe some extremely dangerous people a ton of cash. Give me exactly $200,000 right now, and I will testify under oath that she is lying. I will blow her entire fake case right out of the water." I stared at this pathetic, cowardly man in pure disgust. "Are you seriously asking me for a massive cash bribe just to tell the legal truth? I'm asking you for a lifeline," he shouted, his voice cracking. "These guys are going to break both of my legs, Maya." "Then you better start learning how to walk on your hands," I replied with absolute freezing calm. "I do not negotiate with terrorists, and I definitely do not pay off my mother's greedy accomplices." I slammed my car door in his face, locking it instantly, and drove away, leaving him shivering alone in the bitter winter wind. I acted tough, but inside, my stomach was twisting into agonizing knots. I was trying so hard to be strong, but Catherine was building a bulletproof fake will. My bank accounts were draining dangerously fast, and if I didn't find Grandfather Walter's hidden room soon, my mother was going to steal my entire life. Catherine's lawyer set up an official settlement meeting halfway through month 5. We met at a quiet, neutral cafe, right in downtown Hanover. Catherine floated through the glass doors dressed in perfect, expensive morning attire, a crisp black Chanel suit and elegant pearl earrings. She had absolutely perfected the aesthetic of a grieving, heartbroken daughter. Robert sat silently beside her like a well-trained, terrified lapdog. I sat across from them, completely alone. Catherine folded her manicured hands gently on the smooth table. "Sweetheart, I really don't want this horrible ugliness any more than you do. Drop the nasty lawsuit today." "I can't do that," I replied, my tone steady. Her sympathetic smile was heavily rehearsed. "But I can offer you a very generous deal right now. A clean 50-50 split." 4 weeks ago, a thick cream-colored envelope arrived at my office. Gold-embossed lettering, heavy expensive paper that smelled faintly of old money and arrogance. "Robert Ingrams gracefully requests the pleasure of your company to celebrate his grand retirement." I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered right over my trash can. I almost threw it away. Almost. But then my mind drifted to Grandma Martha's warm, comforting voice. I thought about 14 quiet years of completely swallowing my own words, about every single cruel promise broken, and every wooden door slammed tightly shut in my young face. You are not running anymore, I told myself. I RSVP'd yes. I did not do it because I foolishly wanted a sweet family reunion. I didn't hold any secret hope that a miracle had somehow changed their freezing hearts. I went because I knew, with absolute terrifying certainty, that my father would confidently do something completely unforgivable that night. And when he finally did, I wanted to be standing right there in the room, fully ready to say my final goodbye entirely on my own terms. I just didn't know how incredibly right my gut instincts would be. The Glencoe Country Club hadn't changed a single bit in 35 years. It still held the exact same glowing Swarovski crystal chandeliers, the same overly polite valet service, and the same loud crowd of old wealth and desperate new ambition pretending they actually liked each other. The crisp October wind bit at my skin as I stepped out of my car. I wore a sharp black Versace dress. It was simple, perfectly elegant, and undeniably expensive. My grandmother's soft pearl earrings rested against my neck. A silver Tiffany watch wrapped my wrist, and I carried a classic Chanel bag. Every single beautiful thing I wore, I had bought with my own hard-earned money. That heavy truth mattered to my soul far more than the famous designer labels. Laura immediately intercepted me at the grand entrance like a highly trained guard dog. Her face had naturally aged, but her bright, practiced smile hadn't shifted an inch. It was still that perfect plastic mask of fake warmth cleverly hiding a freezing winter underneath. Her elegant dress was Prada. Her flashing diamonds were painfully large, and her sharp eyes did a lightning-fast, highly critical inventory of my entire outfit before she even breathed a word. Harper, you actually came. Her sharp tone heavily suggested my arrival was both a mild surprise and a deeply annoying inconvenience. Your father truly wasn't sure you would have anything appropriate to wear to an event like this. I smiled back, perfectly matching her fake sweetness. You have no idea what I am capable of wearing, or doing. How wonderfully thoughtful of him to worry about my closet. Inside the massive ballroom, 250 wealthy guests happily mingled beneath blinding crystal light. It was the absolute who's who of the powerful Illinois business world. Wealthy bankers, slick corporate lawyers, towering executives, and smiling politicians. I easily recognized dozens of older faces from my father's fancy childhood dinner parties. Not a single one of them recognized me. I was a total stranger walking through my own past. Mason suddenly swept past my shoulder with a model-thin blonde tightly gripping his arm. He didn't even glance in my general direction. He was loudly bragging to an older man about his grand, bold vision for the company's bright future. Classic Mason. All loud, empty confidence, containing absolutely zero substance. I quietly found my assigned seat. Table 16. It was shoved in the darkest, furthest back corner of the room, parked dangerously close to the noisy kitchen swinging doors. I was placed with distant friends of the family I had never even met. I wasn't at the main family table. I wasn't even in their general orbit. I wasn't surprised by the blatant insult, but I filed it away in my memory. A waiter offered a silver tray. Crystal champagne. Nothing but the absolute best for Robert Ingram's crowning night. I took a freezing glass. Across the glowing room, I briefly caught my father's sharp eye. He nodded exactly once, a cold dismissal cleverly disguised as a polite greeting, then quickly turned his back to focus on his real guests. The long evening was just beginning, and I had been given a front-row seat to my own family's deep contempt. I have learned over the tough years that the absolute best, most valuable information always comes from simply staying quiet and keeping your ears wide open. Sitting alone at my dark corner table, I carefully watched and listened. The rich acoustics in that grand ballroom carried secret conversations much better than those arrogant people realized. My father was proudly holding court near the main bar, completely surrounded by wealthy business associates. I heard him smoothly mention major operational restructuring and powerful strategic partnerships, just standard, boring executive speak. But then my ears caught a very specific name. Pinnacle Logistics Solutions has been absolutely transformative for us. He was loudly boasting to a silver-haired man I instantly recognized as a major shipping titan. They are the strong backbone of our daily operations now. Honestly, whoever runs that brilliant company is an absolute genius. The other older man nodded deeply in agreement. I have been trying desperately to get a single meeting with them for 6 solid months. They run a very private, airtight operation. Do you happen to know who is really behind it? My father shrugged his shoulders easily. I have never met them personally. Every single thing goes strictly through their legal team and account managers. But honestly, I really don't care who they are, as long as they just keep delivering those incredible results. I slowly took a long sip of my freezing champagne to hide my massive growing smile. Oh, Dad, you are going to care very soon. Suddenly my phone buzzed violently inside my purse. A glowing text from David, my loyal CFO. Contract renewal docs from Ingram's Logistics just arrived on my desk today. They desperately want another 4 full years. Waiting on your exact decision. I quickly typed back under the table. I will have a firm answer by the end of the week. What my proud father absolutely didn't know, what literally nobody in that entire glittering room knew, was that Pinnacle's massive survival contract with Ingram's Logistics was officially coming up for renewal right now. If my company simply walked away, his precious empire would instantly lose 45% of their operational efficiency overnight. In the brutal world of logistics, that massive drop is not just a minor inconvenience. It is a rapid, bleeding death sentence. I honestly hadn't decided what I was going to do just yet. A small logical part of me truly wanted to keep my clean professional relationship totally separate from my dark personal toxicity. But as I sat there in the shadows, watching my father happily soak up endless praise for his company's massive success, a success built entirely on the bleeding back of my own hidden work, I felt a dangerous shift in my soul. The invisible ghost was finally ready to step into the light, and tonight would trigger an unstoppable war they could never win. I desperately needed a fresh refill on my champagne. Or maybe I just needed to physically move to shake off the vibrating electric energy building deep in my chest. Walking toward the glowing bar, I walked straight into the extended family firing squad. Aunt Sarah, Laura's younger sister, spotted my face first. Her expression instantly did that terrible familiar dance where mild surprise rapidly turns into deep pity and then settles into cruel condescension, all in less than half a second. Harper. Oh my goodness, I almost didn't even recognize you. She let her eyes slowly travel up and down my body, silently judging my worth. You look, well, still up in Chicago doing whatever it is you do. Consulting, right? Supply chain management, I said, keeping my tone perfectly flat. Oh, how nice. The way she stretched those 2 words made my skin crawl. Are you seeing anyone special? Your father mentioned you are still completely single. 34 now, right? Time just flies away. Before I could even take a breath to respond, Uncle Derek slid right into the circle. Robert was just telling me you are still trying to figure things out. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being a late bloomer, sweetie. I suppose not everyone is meant for traditional success. Wait. My mind froze. Robert was just telling them. I realized with total freezing clarity exactly what had happened. My father had actively briefed them. He had given his loyal guests carefully rehearsed talking points about the ultimate family disappointment. He had planted a pathetic narrative before I even walked through the front doors. Robert said you had some emotional difficulties after you abruptly left school, Aunt Sarah continued, lowering her voice like we were sharing a dark secret. Mental health struggles. It is honestly so brave of you to show your face tonight despite everything. I felt my fingers tighten like a steel trap around the thin stem of my crystal glass. Not from fresh hurt. I was light years past feeling hurt by these empty people. I was gripping the glass from the sheer breathtaking audacity of his lies. He didn't just break my wings. He convinced the whole world I was crazy for trying to fly. I deeply appreciate the concern, Sarah, I said, forcing my voice to remain smooth as glass. But I am actually doing very well, better than I have ever been. They immediately exchanged knowing glances. The specific kind of heavy look that screams, poor thing doesn't even realize how far she has fallen into the dirt. I quickly excused myself before I let the fire spill out of my mouth. But a solid plan was already taking shape in my racing mind. Cold, crystal clear, inevitable. Mason found me standing alone on the dark stone terrace, looking blindly out at the green golf course. The crisp October air kissed my hot cheeks, and bright stars were just starting to poke through the black sky. Well, his deep voice came from directly behind me, heavy with dark contempt. The prodigal daughter returns. I didn't even bother turning around. Mason. He stepped right beside me, close enough that the choking smell of his expensive Armani cologne invaded my lungs. Dad is about to give his big speech. I just came out here to make absolutely sure you weren't planning on causing any dramatic scenes to ruin his night. Why on earth would I do that? Because you have always been insanely jealous. He stated it like a proven scientific fact. The pathetic way you stormed off after that tuition decision. The cowardly way you disappeared to Chicago like a wounded animal. You have never gotten over it. Now I finally turned my body. I looked my stepbrother dead in the eyes. taking in his perfectly tailored suit, his flashing gold watch, his styled hair. A hollow prince wearing a stolen crown. "Is that the fairy tale you tell yourself to sleep at night?" I asked softly. His dark eyes hardened to stone. "I heard you started some kind of pathetic little company up there, playing pretend businesswoman." He let out a short, incredibly cruel laugh. "How long until it completely fails, Harper? 8 months? A year? And then you will come crawling right back on your knees, begging Dad for a handout. You are weak. You always have been." I could have completely destroyed him right then. I could have told him the truth about Pinnacle, about how his precious new company's survival was built entirely on the bleeding back of the sister he was currently insulting. But I held my tongue. Some explosive revelations truly need the absolute perfect stage to leave a permanent scar. "You know what, Mason?" I whispered, my voice calm and completely unafraid. "You can keep believing whatever little lies make you feel better." I started to walk past his shoulder but stopped for one final second. "But I promise you this. After tonight you are going to deeply wish you had treated me a lot differently." His mocking laughter followed me all the way back inside the glowing ballroom. It was dismissive and arrogantly loud. He had absolutely no idea what kind of storm was coming for his paper castle. None of them did. But the main event was finally about to start, and my father was about to hand me the exact match I needed to burn it all down. The grand ballroom lights slowly dimmed down to a soft golden glow. A bright white spotlight instantly hit the main wooden stage. My father proudly climbed the carpeted steps to thunderous, echoing applause. He looked exactly like the conquering hero of Illinois logistics, confidently taking his final glorious bow. Thank you all so much," he said, his smooth voice carrying that practiced, rich warmth he had perfectly crafted over decades. 45 long years in this demanding business. It has been one hell of an incredible ride. Loud laughter and more wild applause filled the massive space. He smoothly began his polished speech, thanking loyal partners, hardworking employees, and old mentors. He thanked God, he thanked pure luck, and naturally, he took the main credit for absolutely everything. Then came the sweet family segment. I truly could not have done any of this without my incredible, beautiful wife, Laura. He gestured warmly to her front row table. 35 years of patiently putting up with my late nights and endless business trips. You are a living saint. More roaring applause. Laura delicately dabbed at her dry eyes, perfectly on cue like a highly trained actress. And my brilliant son, Mason, who will officially be taking over as CEO come February. Robert beamed with glowing pride. He is the bright, unstoppable future of Ingram's Logistics. I simply could not be prouder of the man he has become. A massive standing ovation swept the crowd. Mason proudly rose from his chair and waved humbly. He was the flawless picture of young corporate royalty. Then, my father's sharp eyes actively searched the dark room. When they finally found my face shoved in the far back corner, something ugly shifted deep in his expression, something remarkably mean. And of course my daughter, Harper. The blinding spotlight suddenly swung across the room, hitting my small table. I felt 250 pairs of curious, judging eyes turned sharply toward me. To them I had no college degree, no real career, and just freeloaded off the wealthy family. He paused for cruel comedic effect. But hey, at least she actually showed up tonight. Maybe someday she will finally find a rich husband to take care of her. The entire room erupted in booming laughter. Real, deep laughter. It was the specific kind of joyful noise that comes from wealthy people who think they are in on a harmless joke, completely not realizing they are eagerly watching pure cruelty dressed up as light comedy. This is it. This is the very best you can do. I sat perfectly still. I didn't flinch a single muscle. I didn't let a single hot tear fall. I didn't even look away from his smiling face. I just waited patiently for the ugly laughter to finally fade into complete silence. And then, I slowly stood up. The entire room went instantly quiet as I rose. I could feel the heavy weight of every single eye locked tightly on my skin. Some looked curious, some were deeply pitying, and some were already preparing to witness a messy public breakdown. They fully expected the unstable, jealous daughter to finally crack under her powerful father's harmless joke. I calmly picked up my crystal champagne glass. My movements were slow, graceful, and highly deliberate. My father's victorious smile faltered just a tiny fraction of an inch. He had absolutely not expected me to react. I never ever did. I was supposed to sit there silently and take the painful hit exactly like I always had. I raised the sparkling glass straight toward him. "Congratulations on your grand retirement, Dad." My voice was crystal clear, perfectly steady, and loud enough for every single microphone in the massive room to pick up. 45 years in business. That is quite an impressive achievement. I paused, letting the heavy words hang in the freezing air. You taught me a lot about hard work, about sacrifice, and about exactly what kind of loyalty a family can truly expect from you. The silence in the ballroom was absolute now. You could have heard a pin drop. I could actually hear someone's ice clinking nervously in their glass 3 tables away. So, here is to you. I lifted my champagne slightly higher. Cheers, because this is the absolute last time any of you will ever see me. I gently set the full glass down on the table without taking a single drop. Then I smoothly picked up my black Chanel bag, turned my back, and walked straight toward the grand exit. My Versace heels clicked sharply against the polished hardwood floor. It was the absolute only sound left in that cavernous room. I didn't run. I didn't hurry my pace. I just walked, spine completely straight, head held high. Behind me there was only silence. Complete, total, devastating silence. Someone gasped loudly. Someone else whispered something I couldn't quite hear. But mostly there was just the heavy echo of my steady footsteps and 250 stunned people trying to rapidly process what they had just witnessed. The quiet daughter who was supposed to be forever broken had just walked out entirely on her own terms. I pushed heavily through the giant double doors and stepped out into the freezing night air. And for the very first time in 14 long years, I felt like I could actually breathe. The crushing weight on my chest was instantly gone. I was almost to my sleek car, a black Porsche Taycan with a custom plate reading Miss Ind 1, when I suddenly heard fast, angry footsteps marching up behind me. Harper, you stop right there. Laura's shrill, furious voice cut through the dark. I kept walking. What on earth do you think you are doing? She aggressively grabbed my bare arm, violently spinning my body around to face her. Her normally pale face was bright red beneath the glowing country club parking lights. Her careful, perfect composure was completely shattered. Do you have any idea what you just did? You publicly humiliated your father in front of everyone. I looked down at her tight hand gripping my arm until she slowly, nervously removed it. I humiliated him? I asked quietly, my voice colder than the autumn wind. I think you have that completely backwards, Laura. My father suddenly appeared from the shadows behind her, his face looking like a dark thundercloud. He was hyper-aware that 250 wealthy guests were probably watching this exact moment from the tall glass windows. I could see the gears rapidly calculating in his angry eyes. Get back inside right now, he ordered, his voice low, gravelly, and extremely dangerous. You will apologize to everyone. Now. No. The single powerful word hung in the cold air between us like a drawn sword. This isn't a friendly negotiation, Harper. I am your father. I am telling you. You are telling me what? I cut him off sharply. It was something I had absolutely never done in my entire life. That I should go back in that room and let you keep happily using me as your personal punchline? That I should force a smile while you proudly tell 250 people that I am completely worthless? It was a joke, he barked defensively. It was the honest truth of exactly how you see me. I stared right into his furious eyes, and I am officially done pretending otherwise. I reached out and smoothly opened my heavy car door. My father stepped forward, his fists tightly clenched at his sides. If you leave right now, you are completely done. Do you understand me? No more family, no more financial support, absolutely nothing. I almost let out a real laugh. Dad, you ruthlessly cut me off 14 years ago. You just didn't have the courage to say it out loud. I slid gracefully into the soft leather driver's seat. Tonight I am finally saying it for both of us. I confidently pushed the start button, and the powerful engine roared to life. Goodbye, and I drove away into the pitch-black night. I pulled into a quiet, empty rest stop about 30 minutes outside of Glencoe. I parked the car and sat completely alone in the dark, the engine humming quietly, my trembling hands still tightly gripping the steering wheel. For a long, beautiful moment, I just closed my eyes and breathed in the pure air. I was finally free of their toxic shadows forever, but the real devastating storm I had just unleashed on their perfect corporate world was only hours away from violently striking. Okay, let me step out of this story for just a quick second and talk directly to your heart. I know deep down some of you listening right now have survived something painfully similar. Maybe your personal nightmare wasn't a fancy retirement party. Maybe you didn't have hundreds of wealthy witnesses staring blankly at your humiliation, but that heavy sinking feeling of being the ultimate family disappointment, the one they only ever talk about in harsh judging whispers, the one whose beautiful success they completely refuse to see. I know you understand that dark place. If you have ever sat silently at a loud family gathering while someone casually made you the cruel punchline, If you have ever forced a fake smile through burning pain just because making a dramatic scene would only prove their toxic lies right. If you have ever deeply loved people who naturally made you feel entirely invisible, this story is for you. I see your invisible scars. So here is what I am asking. If any piece of this painful journey is resonating with your soul, drop a quick comment below. Tell me your personal story, or just let me know you are still here, still fighting, because honestly, knowing I am not completely alone in this cold world, that means far more to me than you can possibly imagine. And if you desperately want to know exactly what happened next, and trust me, the next part is where the ground completely falls out from under them, make sure you are fully subscribed. Hit that bell icon right now, because what my arrogant father discovered in the frantic weeks after that explosive party, well, let's just say he finally learned exactly how dangerously wrong he was about the daughter he threw away. Now let's jump back into the fire. The morning after the country club disaster, I woke up in my quiet Chicago apartment feeling physically lighter than I had in a decade. Warm sunlight was pouring beautifully through the large glass windows, touching my bare skin. I am finally breathing my own air, I thought, staring up at the white ceiling. But I wisely knew it was not truly over. Wealthy, controlling families like mine absolutely never let go that easily. They would desperately try to control the public narrative, aggressively spin the wild story, and quickly paint me as the crazy villain. What those arrogant people didn't know was that I secretly held a massive trump card they couldn't possibly spin their way out of. Let me tell you exactly how the crazy week followed. It all started with the rapid buzzing of text messages. The screen lit up constantly. Not from my father, of course. He was far too proud to reach out first. But messages flooded in from distant cousins, gossiping aunts, and old family friends. People I hadn't spoken a single word to in years were suddenly intensely concerned about my fragile mental state. "Harper, I heard what happened at the party. Your dad says you are really struggling. Do you need professional help? Sarah told me you had some kind of tragic breakdown last night. We are all so worried about you, sweetie. Your father loves you deeply. He just wants what is best. Maybe you should just apologize and come back home." The fake narrative was already being perfectly written. Poor tragic Harper. So unstable. So bitterly jealous. She had a manic episode at the party. And Robert Ingram's. He is just a patient, loving father, doing his absolute best to manage a deeply troubled daughter. You are all just blind puppets dancing on his strings, I thought, staring at the glowing screen. I didn't respond to a single one of their poisonous messages. Then came the much more interesting, dangerous call. My cell phone rang sharply on Wednesday morning. An unknown Illinois area code flashed. I answered it anyway, pressing the cold glass against my ear. "Miss Ingrams, this is Jacob Carter. I am a senior partner at Ingrams Logistics." The man's voice was slick, polished, and extremely professional. It sounded like a sharp knife slicing through soft butter. "I am quietly calling on behalf of Robert. He would very much like to sit down and discuss mending some broken fences." "Really?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. "Yes, and just between you and me, there has been some rather concerning chatter regarding your personal connection to certain business partners. Silly rumors, probably absolutely nothing. But Robert thought it would be a good idea to clear the air." My blood ran instantly cold. "Rumors? Business partners? They are fishing. What exact kind of rumors?" I asked, forcing my breathing to stay slow and steady. "Oh, just something strange about our major consulting partners over at Pinnacle. Someone mistakenly thought they had seen you walking near their corporate offices once. I am sure it is just a massive misunderstanding." My mind raced at 1,000,000 miles an hour. How? Who could have possibly seen me? "When? I am honestly not sure what you are referring to," I said smoothly, betraying zero panic. "But please tell my father I have absolutely nothing left to discuss with him." I hung up the phone quickly. My heart pounded wildly against my ribs. They were getting close, much, much closer than I had ever realized. It was officially time to stop patiently waiting and start aggressively acting. While I was expertly fielding fake concerned texts in Chicago, my father was facing a completely different, terrifying kind of crisis down in Illinois. I learned much later exactly what went down inside his pristine corporate boardroom. Robert Ingrams had confidently walked into what should have been a very boring, routine quarterly financial meeting. Instead, his veteran CFO looked like he had just seen a terrifying ghost. Cold sweat beaded on the older man's pale forehead. "We have a massive problem with Pinnacle Logistics Solutions," the nervous CFO said, slowly sliding a thick red folder across the shiny mahogany table. "Their giant contract is up for renewal in exactly 8 months. They simply haven't responded to our generous extension offer." Robert frowned deeply, waving his hand dismissively. So just send them another offer. Increase the financial terms if you have to. Throw money at it. We have already tried 3 separate times, sir. Their ironclad legal team just keeps saying the offer is under review. Nothing else. Then call their executive leadership directly. Robert barked, losing his famous patience. We have desperately tried that too. The CFO shifted very uncomfortably in his expensive chair. Sir, Pinnacle Logistics Solutions is an extremely private entity. Absolutely no one meets with their actual leadership. Every single thing goes strictly through faceless intermediaries. Robert's deep frown turned into a dark scowl. We have been doing massive business with them for 2 solid years. Someone in this building must have met with them. No, sir. It has all been locked-down virtual meetings, legal representatives, and lower-level account managers. No one at this entire company has ever met the actual ownership. A long, heavy silence suffocated the grand room. If they decide to walk away from us, the sweating CFO continued, his voice trembling slightly, we will instantly lose 45% of our daily operational efficiency overnight. It would take us at least 24 long months to desperately find a suitable replacement, and frankly, that is being highly optimistic in this brutal market. I know exactly what it means. Robert violently snapped. He stared down at the red folder. Something dark and uncomfortable was nagging at the back of his mind. This is not a coincidence. The strange timing, the sudden dead silence, the spings that the sabadisficus ball. Find out exactly who owns that damn company, my father ordered coldly. I honestly do not care what it takes or how much it costs. I want a real name on my desk by the end of this week. What the great Robert Ingrams didn't know what was about to completely destroy his perfect empire was that the elusive name he was furiously hunting for was already written in his own bloodline. But the blind panic inside Ingram's Logistics didn't just stop at boring board meetings. It spilled out into the dark. 2 tense days later, my CFO David walked briskly into my office. He didn't look scared. He looked absolutely disgusted. He silently marched up and pressed a small silver audio recorder right onto the center of my desk. You really need to hear this, he said, his voice flat. Mason, wildly desperate to save his brand new position as CEO before the massive contract expired, had ambushed David in the dim parking garage of our building. Mason didn't know I actually owned the company. He just thought David was a greedy standard executive who could be easily bought. I slowly pressed play. Mason's arrogant, deeply trembling voice instantly filled my quiet room. Look, David, just name your exact price. 50 grand? 100,000? Just give me Pinnacle's proprietary routing software on a hidden flash drive. We can quietly build our own internal system. Absolutely no one has to know. You fool. You handed me the match. Mason had just blatantly committed corporate espionage right on a digital tape. He practically wrapped the loaded gun in a bright bow and handed it directly to me. Friday evening, my cell phone rang loudly on the kitchen counter. Laura. I stared at the flashing screen. I almost didn't answer it, but deep curiosity finally got the better of me. Harper. Sweetheart. Her voice poured out like warm honey and pure sugar. It was the acting performance of a lifetime. I have been so incredibly worried about you. Have you? I asked plainly. Of course, we are your family. That is what real family does. She laughed softly, trying to make it sound like we were sharing a sweet private joke. Listen, about that silly party, your father feels just terrible. He honestly didn't mean what he said out loud. You know exactly how he gets. He was just nervous up there, trying so hard to be funny. He told 250 people I had no future. That is not a punchline. He exaggerates when he feels anxious. You know that. Laura paused, quickly recalibrating her sweet tone. Why don't you just come home this weekend? We could have a nice, quiet dinner. Just the 4 of us. Clear the air, start completely fresh. I could easily picture her sitting in that pristine, perfectly clean living room, carefully rehearsing this exact phone call. She was plotting exactly which emotional buttons to push. The deeply concerned mother, the gentle peacemaker, the loving bridge between a troubled daughter and a wounded father. Does Dad actually want to apologize? I asked, cutting through the sweet fog. A slight heavy hesitation followed. He deeply wants to move forward. That is what really matters in the end, isn't it? So no apology. Harper, please don't be difficult. We are actively trying to help you. Help me, now. I let out a dry, hollow laugh. Laura, you have spent 24 long years making absolutely sure I knew I wasn't really a part of this family. Now you are suddenly calling to help me. Why? Another pause followed. Much longer this time. The warm honey vanished. "I think we both know there is a lot more going on here than just normal family drama," she said, her voice completely dropping its fake warmth. It became hard and sharp. "Whatever strange thing you are planning, and I deeply know you are planning something, it would be much better for everyone if you just came home and talked this through right now." "No." I hung up the phone before she could even breathe a response. They definitely knew something was wrong. They just didn't realize how much they needed to be afraid yet. The very next morning, I drove straight to Evelyn Stone's towering office in downtown Chicago. Evelyn had proudly been my grandmother's loyal lawyer, and since the secret trust fund had become fully mine, she was my strongest shield. Her beautiful office was sleek and efficient, cold glass and solid steel, featuring breathtaking views of the Chicago skyline. It was the exact kind of high-powered place where extremely serious business happened. "I have been heavily expecting you," she said the moment I walked through the door. "I assume this urgent visit is about Ingram's Logistics. They are aggressively investigating Pinnacle right now, desperately trying to find out who really owns it." Evelyn nodded, completely unsurprised by the news. "Your strict anonymity was always going to be temporary, Harper. The only real question now is, how exactly do you want this explosion to unfold?" She quickly spread thick, important documents across her smooth desk. The massive Pinnacle contract with Ingram's Logistics. Every single legal clause, every complex renewal term, every hidden exit provision. Beside it sat the secure trust fund documents and the airtight company incorporation papers. "Your signed contract clearly includes a standard 45-day termination notice," Evelyn said, pointing a sharp manicured finger to the relevant section. "You can legally end the entire agreement for absolutely any reason you want. 0 financial penalties. 0 legal exposure." She then tapped the other stack of papers. "And your grandmother's private trust is completely separate from the main Ingram's family estate. It is legally unimpeachable. Robert has absolutely no claim to any of it, even if he stupidly tried to contest it in court." She looked deeply at me right over her reading glasses. Martha made absolutely sure of that. I stared down at the crisp papers. Everything was in perfect order. Everything was completely legal. Every moinery crossed, every moine dotted. "What did my grandmother actually say about all this when she first set up the trust?" I asked softly. Evelyn smiled a very sad, knowing smile. She said, "One day, my Harper is going to need heavy leverage, and when that dark day finally comes, I want her to hold all the power." I felt hot tears prick sharply at the corners of my eyes. Grandma Martha, still fiercely protecting me, even from the grave. "She also said something else," Evelyn gently added. "She told me to tell you not to be unnecessarily cruel about it. Just be completely honest. Sometimes the naked truth is punishment enough." I nodded slowly. The heavy truth it was. Later that same afternoon, I sat firmly down with David Reed in Pinnacle's quiet conference room. David had been fiercely loyal to me since year 2. He knew absolutely everything about my toxic family, about the giant Ingram's Logistics, and exactly why I had kept my own name entirely off the public paperwork. He was highly competent, steady, and the absolute closest thing I had to a true battlefield ally. "They desperately want to renew the contract," he said, scrolling quickly through his glowing tablet. 4 more solid years. They are actually offering to increase the financial terms by 15%. They are incredibly nervous. They should be. I pulled up the complex financial projections on the giant conference room screen. Pure numbers absolutely never lie, and these specific numbers told a devastating, terrifying story. If we proudly walk away, Ingram's Logistics loses 45% of their total operational efficiency within 90 short days. In the fast-paced logistics world, that is not just a minor dip. That is a terrifying free fall off a steep cliff. Their angry clients will instantly start looking elsewhere. Their profit margins will completely collapse into dust. David nodded solemnly. Mason just took over as the Golden CEO. If this massive disaster hits on his watch, his entire reputation is completely finished before he even truly starts. We sat in heavy silence with that dark reality for a moment. It felt entirely surreal, holding so much raw, unstoppable power over the exact people who had spent decades intentionally making me feel completely powerless. "What do you want to do?" David finally asked. I had been deeply thinking about this exact choice for days, about Grandma Martha's wise, gentle words, about bitter revenge versus the clean truth, about exactly what kind of strong person I truly wanted to be in the light. "Draft the official termination letter," I said finally, my voice unwavering. "Give them the 45-day notice exactly per the contract terms. No anger, No malice. Absolutely no wild accusations. Keep it strictly business. And the official reason, strategic repositioning. That is absolutely all they need to know on the official company record. I paused, taking a deep, shuddering breath. But I am also going to write a highly personal letter directly to my father. It will go in a separate sealed envelope. He deeply deserves to know exactly who he has been hopelessly depending on all this time, and exactly why that lifeline is ending today. David nodded in complete understanding. When do you want to officially send it out? Monday. First thing in the bright morning. No more waiting in the dark. No more hiding behind walls. The ghost was finally shedding her invisible cloak, and when Robert Ingrams opened that envelope, his entire flawless universe was going to violently shatter into a million pieces. I spent all of Sunday writing that fateful letter. I didn't write the dry official termination notice. David expertly handled all the cold legal language, the strict provisions, and the clinical explanation for the company file. I sat alone in my quiet apartment and wrote the deeply personal letter. The raw, unfiltered truth. I painfully chewed through 8 different drafts. The very first one was entirely too angry. Pages of wild accusations, cataloging every single hurt, and condemning them all. The second draft was far too cold. The third sounded too desperate for their approval. But the final version was incredibly simple, clean, and completely factual. Dear Dad, you loudly said I had no future. You proudly told 250 people I was worthless. I want you to know something real. The massive company you called the strong backbone of Ingram's Logistics, Pinnacle Logistics Solutions, is entirely mine. I built it from the dirt. I own it. For 2 long years, the exact daughter you happily dismissed has been the hidden cornerstone of your entire business. I am ending our massive contract today, not as bitter revenge, but as a healthy boundary. Grandma Martha quietly left me a secure trust fund you never knew existed. She actually saw what you willfully couldn't, that I was deeply worth investing in. Everything I have today, I built myself with her pure faith, and completely without your support. I absolutely do not need you to apologize. I do not need you to finally understand. I just need you to look at the facts and know that I am not what you said I was. I never ever was. Do not contact me again. Harper Martha Ingrams. I included my middle name highly deliberately. It was the name I had legally added 2 years ago in deep honor of the only person in my entire bloodline who ever believed in me. I also slipped in a crisp photocopy of the Pinnacle Incorporation papers. My name was stamped as the sole owner, clearly visible in black ink. I read the short letter 3 times. I checked for silly typos. I checked for excessive, bleeding emotion. I found none. Just the heavy, undeniable truth. Sometimes I thought, sealing the envelope, the honest truth is the most devastating weapon of all. Monday, 8 a.m. A bright digital courier confirmation popped onto my screen. The package had officially arrived at Ingram's Logistics headquarters. Someone named Penelope Cho had signed for it. Robert's veteran executive assistant. I vividly remembered her tired face from my childhood. I sat completely still in my office chair, watching my cell phone, waiting in the quiet. 9:15 a.m. Missed call from Robert Ingrams. 9:17 a.m. Missed call from Robert Ingrams. Missed call from Mason Ingrams. 9:31 a.m. Missed call from Laura Ingrams. 9:45 a.m. Missed call from Robert Ingrams. 10:02 a.m. Text message from Mason. What the hell is this? Call us right now. 10:34 a.m. Text message from Laura. Harper, this is not funny anymore. Pick up your phone. By high noon I had 14 frantic missed calls, 10 aggressive text messages, and 3 long voicemails I didn't even bother listening to. I didn't respond to a single one. I had patiently waited 14 brutal years for this exact moment. They could easily sweat for a few more hours. At 3 p.m. sharp, my nervous assistant knocked quietly on my heavy door. Miss Ingrams, there is a very tense family out in the lobby who says they absolutely need to see you immediately. Her voice suddenly dropped to a nervous whisper. And Miss Ingrams, they aren't alone. They brought 2 older gentlemen in very expensive suits. I recognize one from Forbes magazine. It is Arthur Vance, the lead financial investor for Ingram's Logistics. They drove all the way to Chicago, 5 grueling hours of heavy traffic and blind panic, just to confront me in person. My father hadn't just come to bully a random consulting firm. He had desperately brought his heaviest hitters, his powerful board members, to fiercely intimidate the faceless owner of Pinnacle into extending their dying contract. I took a very deep breath, checking my reflection in the cool window glass. I slowly straightened my tailored blazer. I am not that terrified 21-year-old girl anymore. Send them directly to conference room C, I instructed calmly. I will be there in exactly 10 minutes. This was it. The massive confrontation I had vividly imagined 1,000 times in the dark. I thought of Grandma Martha. Don't be cruel, she had whispered in that letter. Just be honest. I stood up, smoothed my dark skirt, and walked confidently down the hallway. They thought they were walking in to bully a stranger, but they were blindly marching into a steel trap they had spent 14 years building themselves. Conference room C had clear floor-to-ceiling glass walls. I had chosen it highly deliberately. My 18 loyal employees could safely see inside, though they couldn't hear a single word. They were silent witnesses, not to humiliate my family, but to heavily ensure the explosive meeting stayed completely civil. Robert, Laura, and Mason stood tightly clustered near the tall window, nervously looking out at the sprawling Chicago skyline. They had never expected to see the world from this high up, from my personal domain. Arthur Vance and the other wealthy board members sat rigidly at the far end of the long table, looking deeply annoyed to be dragged into a messy vendor dispute. My father turned sharply when I confidently pushed the door open. His face was a sickly pale gray. He looked years older than he had at the party. Harper. His proud voice actually cracked on my name. What is all this? Hello, Dad. Laura. Mason. I took my seat right at the head of the glass table. I was the picture of calm, professional control. Arthur Vance frowned heavily, looking confusedly between me and my pale father. Robert, is this your daughter? The quiet one from the party? Yes, I answered clearly for him. I folded my hands together. I assume you finally received my personal letter. Your letter. Mason stepped forward aggressively, jabbing his finger through the air toward me. You can't just, this isn't. Sit down, Mason. My voice was quiet, but it carried absolute, unbreakable authority. I will not discuss anything with you yelling across my room. He looked at my father, totally uncertain. Robert swallowed hard and nodded sharply. They slowly sat down. For a very long, suffocating moment, no one dared to speak. Finally, Robert leaned heavily forward. This is all just some kind of crazy misunderstanding. What exact part? I asked. Pinnacle Logistics Solutions? You cannot possibly own a massive company like that. You didn't. I did. I smoothly slid a thick black folder across the glass table. It contained company registration, tax filings, and a massive client list. 2 years ago, your struggling company happily signed a lifesaver contract with mine. You loudly praised my work at fancy industry events. You openly called us transformative. You just didn't know you were actually praising me. Laura's face had gone completely sheet white. But, you don't even have a college degree. You were just a what, Laura? A massive disappointment? A total failure? I shook my head slowly. I was a bright 21-year-old kid who was coldly told to sacrifice her entire future for yours. I built something beautiful anyway. Silence crashed down. My father stared in horror at the glowing documents like they might burst into hot flames if he looked hard enough. Arthur Vance snatched the folder before my father could reach it. He rapidly flipped through the state registration and the heavy tax filings. The healthy color completely drained from the billionaire investor's face. Robert, Vance whispered in pure shock. Your daughter owns Pinnacle, the exact company you have been hopelessly relying on for 2 years. Okay. Robert's voice was deeply strained. His famous mask of corporate composure was cracking into dust. I apologize. I deeply apologize about the stupid party. Is that exactly what you want to hear? I am so sorry. Now can we please talk about renewing the contract? You are only saying sorry because you desperately need something from me, I replied softly. That is a transaction, not an apology. For God's sake, Harper. Mason violently slammed his open palm onto the glass table. Do you have any idea what happens if you pull this contract? 25% of our loyal workforce will be gone because of your petty childish revenge. It is not revenge, Mason. It is a very simple business decision. He was fully standing now, thick veins visibly popping in his red neck. You have been secretly planning this evil trap for years, just waiting in the dark to destroy us. This is incredibly sick. They really think they are the victims here. I planned absolutely nothing. I kept my voice perfectly level. I simply built a successful company. Your own company actively chose to become entirely dependent on mine. That is absolutely not my fault. You could have politely told us. Laura interjected, her voice high-pitched and strained with panic. You could have just said something. When? I challenged, my eyes locking onto hers. When you happily told me I didn't need a real education because I would just find a husband. When you actively spread vicious rumors to your wealthy friends that I had severe mental health problems. She snapped her mouth shut. She had absolutely no answer. In fact, I said, my voice dropping to a dead icy calm, I was actually going to let you walk away with just a safely cancelled contract. I wasn't going to ruin you. Until Mason foolishly decided to commit a major felony. The entire room froze solid. The air stopped moving. What on earth are you talking about? My father snapped. Genuine confusion mixing with rising terror. I calmly reached into my blazer pocket, pulled out the small silver audio recorder, and set it right in the center of the table. I pressed the play button. Mason's arrogant, desperate voice loudly echoed off the glass walls, begging my CFO to illegally sell our proprietary software for $100,000. Laura covered her shaking mouth with both hands. Mason stumbled backward in pure horror, his shoulder hitting the glass wall hard. Arthur Vance stood up so incredibly fast that his expensive chair tipped over backwards with a loud crash. Corporate espionage, Vance roared, his face turning dark purple with rage. He glared at my shrinking father. Are you completely out of your mind, Robert? You actually let your idiot son try to steal from our absolute primary vendor. Arthur, please wait. I swear I didn't know. My father frantically stammered. The great untouchable CEO was instantly reduced to a stuttering, terrified mess. We are officially done, Vance snarled, his eyes burning with disgust. The board of directors is completely pulling all financial support, Robert. Effective immediately, you and your son are entirely finished in this city. The two furious investors stormed right out of the glass room, leaving my broken family completely and utterly shattered in their wake. It is over. The castle has fallen. You want to know the absolute worst part, Dad? I said softly into the heavy silence. I honestly would have kept the business contract going. I truly wasn't planning any of this destruction. But then you proudly stood on that stage in front of 250 people and loudly declared I was worthless. That I had absolutely no future. I paused, letting the truth sink into his bones. You actively chose this ending. Not me. Robert's tense jaw worked back and forth. For a tiny fleeting moment, I thought I actually saw a spark of painful recognition in his tired eyes, like he finally truly understood the massive monster he had been. But then, in a flash, it was gone. What do you want? He asked flatly, totally defeated. Nothing you can give me. There must be some number, some price. You are still not listening to me. I do not want anything from you. I never did. I just desperately wanted you to know the real truth. Fine. Robert's voice went terrifyingly cold. The brief vulnerability vanished, instantly replaced by the cruel steel I had feared my whole life. If that is truly how you want to play this vicious game, you walk away from this family forever. You are completely done. No future inheritance. Absolutely nothing. I actually let out a real laugh. Dad, you completely cut me off when I was 21. What magical inheritance are you even talking about? I could easily make things very difficult for you in this city. I have powerful connections, vicious lawyers. On what possible grounds? I leaned slightly forward, resting my elbows on the glass. Every single document on this table is completely legal. Every contract was signed in perfect good faith. There is absolutely nothing here you can sue me for, and we both deeply know it. He glared at me like I was a total stranger. Don't be so incredibly sure of yourself. Actually, I am very sure, because my brilliant lawyer, who also happened to be Grandma Martha's personal lawyer, has already meticulously reviewed every possible angle. I let that heavy name slowly sink into his brain. Do you happen to remember Evelyn Stone? Martha used her specifically because she wisely knew you would try something evil like this someday. Laura loudly gasped. Martha knew about all of this. She left me a private trust fund. I revealed smoothly. $900,000. It was specifically structured so your greedy hands could never touch a single penny. I pulled out a crisp photocopy of the legal trust document. She knew exactly what kind of toxic family she raised, Dad. That is exactly why she protected me from it. Robert's face went from angry red to a sickening white. She had absolutely no right to hide that. She had every right. It was her own money. I finally stood up from the table. This meeting is officially over. We are done here. I walked calmly toward the door, then paused with my hand on the silver handle. One more crucial thing. If you ever try to contact me again, phone calls, text messages, or randomly showing up at my secure office, I will publicly release every single email, every audio file, and every dark record of how this family operates. All of it is perfectly legal. All of it is securely backed up. And all of it would make an incredibly fascinating career-ending story for the local business press. I opened the heavy door. My receptionist will politely show you out. I stood tall in the doorway, quietly watching them frantically gather their scattered pride. 3 arrogant people who had spent my entire existence making me feel impossibly small were now looking very, very tiny themselves. My father rose slowly, moving like a broken old man suddenly painfully aware of his creeping age. Laura tightly clutched her expensive handbag to her chest like it was a bulletproof shield. Mason stared at me with something totally new flashing in his dark eyes. It wasn't bitter contempt anymore. It was pure naked fear. "This isn't truly over," Mason tried to threaten, though his voice shook. "Yes, Mason, it really is. I meant every single syllable. I just spent 14 long years building a beautiful life you constantly tried to convince me I couldn't have. I did it completely without your help, without your fake approval, and without your permission. And I will happily continue to do it without any of you dragging me down." Laura's lower lip trembled violently, the final desperate performance of motherly concern. "Harper, please. We are family. We share some blood, Laura. That is absolutely all we share." I held the glass door open wider. "I am not asking for a fake apology. I am not looking for a sweet reconciliation. I am setting a permanent boundary. Do not ever contact me again. Just let me go." Robert stopped right in front of me. For a fleeting second we just looked closely at each other. A father and a daughter. Total strangers who just happened to tragically share a last name. "Do you really hate us that deeply?" he asked, his voice cracking, barely hovering above a dry whisper. "No, Dad, I don't hate you at all." I met his broken eyes completely steadily. "That is the part you truly don't understand. I just don't need you anymore. And that is something you will have to painfully learn to live with." He had absolutely no response to that terrible truth. They walked silently out through the bright lobby, moving past my focused employees who carefully pretended not to watch the giant titans fall. The heavy glass doors clicked shut securely behind them. I let out a long breath, walked right back to my desk, opened my glowing laptop, and peacefully got back to my real work. Okay, let me just pause here again for a second. If you are still watching this video, first of all, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This dark history isn't easy to drag into the light, and knowing you are truly listening means much more than you know. If you think this is exactly where the dramatic story neatly ends, it absolutely isn't. The massive fallout from that quiet meeting rippled out much further than I ever expected. When I mailed that termination letter, I thought I was simply setting a healthy boundary, fiercely protecting my inner peace, and walking away from toxic people who had constantly hurt me. I honestly didn't anticipate what would rapidly happen to Ingram's logistics, or to my father's pristine public reputation. Here is my quick ask. If this emotional journey has moved you at all, if it's made you deeply think about your own toxic family, your own fierce boundaries, and your own hidden worth, please hit that like button right now. It helps this channel more than you know. And definitely subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on those notifications because the final ending of this wild story, it's incredibly complicated. It is messy, and it genuinely taught me something huge about letting go that I absolutely didn't expect. Also, I would love to hear from your heart. Drop a comment below telling me, have you ever had to walk completely away from toxic family members? Did it feel like taking a breath of fresh freedom, or did it feel like heavy grief, or maybe a strange mix of both? I have read every single beautiful comment on my previous videos, and they have helped me feel so much less alone in this crazy world. So please, share your true thoughts. Now back to the story for the final chapter. But just when I thought the toxic dust had finally settled, a single phone call was about to unearth a dark secret that changed absolutely everything I thought I knew. 1 week after that intense confrontation in my office, I received an unexpected phone call from someone I hadn't spoken a single word to in years. It was my Uncle Ronald, my father's younger, quieter brother. Ronald had always proudly been the eccentric black sheep of the rich Ingrams family. He was a passionate artist, a quiet dreamer, the only one who completely refused to go into the greedy corporate business. I hadn't seen his kind face since my own mother's tragic funeral. "Harper." His voice sounded much older now, much rougher. "I heard exactly what happened at that party, and at Robert's office. Word travels incredibly fast in this small, wealthy community." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "Listen to me closely. There is something you desperately need to know. Something I really should have told you years ago, but I was just too much of a coward." I slowly sat down in my desk chair. My stomach tightened. "I am listening." When your father coldly told you the family couldn't afford both your college tuition and Mason's expensive program, that was a complete lie. I know, Ronald. I figured that out a long time ago. No, Harper. You don't truly understand. His voice cracked with heavy emotion. It wasn't just that there was extra money sitting around. There was a very specific, dedicated fund. Your sick mother secretly set it up right before she died, strictly for your future education. It was more than enough cash to easily cover a full 4 years at absolutely any top school in the country. My heart physically stopped beating. The room instantly tilted sideways. Robert completely drained it, Ronald whispered, sounding sick to his stomach. He selfishly used your dead mother's money to pay for Mason's shiny MBA, and then he looked you in the eye and cruelly told you there was absolutely no money left. My mother bought my freedom, and my father eagerly sold it to buy Mason a crown. Ronald sniffled over the line. Your sweet mother desperately wanted you to have beautiful choices in life, Harper. Robert stole them right out of your hands. I gripped the hard edge of my desk until my knuckles turned bright white. Why on earth didn't you tell me this back then? Because I was terrified of Robert. We all were. Ronald exhaled a long, sad breath. But Martha, your grandmother, she finally found out what he did. That is exactly why she secretly set up that massive trust fund for you. She legally couldn't get your mother's stolen money back, but she could definitely make sure Robert didn't take your entire future too. I thought back to Grandma Martha's handwritten letter. I know exactly what they did to you. She knew the dark, ugly truth all along. Why are you finally telling me this now? I asked, a single tear cutting down my cheek. Because it is finally time the honest truth came out into the light. All of it. He wasn't done. Over the next 2 chaotic months, the brutal consequences of my father's arrogance became highly public. I honestly wasn't trying to closely monitor what happened to Ingram's logistics. I was genuinely trying to heal and move on, but in the tight Illinois business community, bad news travels like a raging wildfire. The struggling company officially announced a massive 25% workforce reduction. 85 hard-working employees were tragically laid off right before the winter holidays. The fake press release loudly blamed shifting market conditions and strategic corporate restructuring. But everyone in the city knew the real ugly story. Their biggest, most vital consulting partner had abruptly walked away, and they completely lacked the brains to recover. Mason, barely 3 months into his golden role as CEO, was already being harshly interrogated by the furious board. His grand vision for the future was rapidly crumbling under the heavy weight of his father's bridge-burning arrogance. Robert desperately came out of his cozy retirement to try and help manage the bleeding crisis. The triumphant, glorious exit he had so carefully planned, the massive legacy he had ruthlessly built, was completely unraveling in front of the whole world. But the truest damage was to their pristine social reputation. The angry board of directors, totally furious over the digital recording I had legally shared regarding Mason's felony, eventually forced both Robert and Mason out of the company entirely. They violently lost their precious company, their valuable shares, and their untouchable prestige. Word rapidly spread through the country clubs. Not from my mouth. I kept completely quiet, but 250 wealthy people had watched my father publicly humiliate his own daughter at that party. And when those exact same gossiping people heard that the worthless daughter was actually his failing company's most vital business partner, the vicious whispers started, and they never stopped. Did you hear about Robert Ingram's? He mocked his own brilliant daughter. Turns out she was the only thing keeping his entire empire afloat. In those elite Illinois business circles, reputation is absolutely everything, and Robert's was reduced to ashes. A former corporate colleague told me that at a recent fancy industry dinner, Robert sat completely alone at a corner table. Absolutely no one wanted to be publicly associated with the foolish man who had proudly disowned the very daughter who had secretly been his strong backbone. I didn't feel a wicked sense of triumph hearing this dark news. I didn't feel deeply satisfied or happy. I just felt incredibly tired. Grandma Martha had been so incredibly right. Sometimes the naked truth is punishment enough. I didn't have to lift another finger to destroy them. The honest truth did it all by itself. 7 quiet months later, I sat comfortably in a warm therapist's office in the Gold Coast. I wasn't there because I was falling apart. I was there because I was finally truly ready to put all my broken pieces back together into something completely new. You really don't seem like someone who desperately needs therapy. Dr. Patel smiled gently during our very first session. Everyone on Earth needs therapy, I replied softly. I am just finally letting myself admit it out loud. We talked for hours about my strange family, about the long freezing years of total invisibility, about the crushing burden of building massive success in total silence, about the incredibly strange, complex grief of permanently cutting ties with the exact people who were naturally supposed to love me the most. "Do you ever regret what you did to them?" she asked one rainy afternoon. "No, and I meant it with my whole soul. I deeply regret that it had to happen at all, but I will never regret fiercely protecting myself." Outside of that quiet therapy room, my new life was truly good, better than good. Pinnacle was absolutely thriving in the sunlight. We had easily replaced the massive Ingrams contract with 3 smaller, much friendlier clients. We were more diversified, and much more stable. David got a massive promotion. I happily hired 4 brilliant new employees. We moved our headquarters to a much bigger, brighter office with stunning views of the Blue Lake. I warmly reconnected with Uncle Ronald. We now get dinner together once a month. He tells me beautiful, funny stories about my mother. The real messy ones. Not the cold, sanitized versions my father had fed me. She had been incredibly fierce, apparently. Deeply stubborn and a passionate fighter. "You are exactly like her." Ronald smiled over coffee one evening. "She would be so unbelievably proud of the woman you became." I still keep the small silver-framed photo of Grandma Martha right on my desk. I visit her quiet grave every single month. I leave fresh, bright flowers. I tell her all about my growing business and my new life. It felt a little strange at first, talking out loud to a cold headstone, but it was also incredibly healing. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered to her one crisp spring morning. "I didn't let their lies define me." The gentle wind rustled softly through the green cemetery trees. If I closed my eyes and listened very closely, I could almost hear her warm voice carrying through the breeze. "I knew you would, sweetheart. I always knew." So here is exactly what I learned from this entire nightmare. If you desperately want the final moral of this long story, listen to this. Your true worth is absolutely not determined by a fancy college degree. It is not determined by your toxic family's loud opinion of you. It is not determined by who blindly believes in you, or who aggressively tries to tear you down to make themselves feel taller. Your worth is solely determined by what you quietly build when absolutely no one is watching, by exactly who you become when the whole world counts you out, by the beautiful, peaceful life you actively create with your own 2 hands. My father arrogantly thought he was teaching me a harsh lesson at that glittering retirement party. He truly thought he was putting me back in my tiny, invisible place. What he actually did was hand me the key to my own cage. He set me completely free. I do not hate my family anymore. That is the one part people always struggle to fully understand. Carrying deep hate takes massive amounts of energy. Hate is a heavy, rusty chain around your own neck. I would much rather spend my precious energy on the kind people who actually deserve it, on the meaningful work I deeply believe in, on warm relationships that truly nourish my soul, on a peaceful life that is finally truly mine. Strong boundaries are not about petty revenge. They are about fierce self-protection. They are about drawing a firm line in the sand and proudly saying, "This is exactly where my beautiful life begins and where your toxic damage finally ends." If you are currently trapped in a family that actively makes you feel impossibly small, if you have jealous people in your life who view your bright potential as a dangerous threat instead of a wonderful gift, if you have ever been labeled the ultimate family disappointment, the quiet scapegoat, the invisible ghost in the hallway, I truly see you. I have been you. And I promise you with every beat of my heart, there is a beautiful, breathing life waiting for you on the absolute other side of walking away. This painful journey we just walked together, this raw, bleeding, and ultimately triumphant truth, is living proof that you can survive the deepest cuts and build your own shining castle from the ruins. If this intense story touched that hidden, healing part of your soul, if you felt every single racing heartbeat, every cold tear, and every massive victory right alongside me, please leave a like and subscribe to stay close. We are building a real family here, a safe harbor for powerful, heart-touching truths that absolutely refuse to stay hidden in the dark. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a single moment of our shared strength. And please always remember, you are absolutely not what they said you were. You never ever were. You are so much more. Until next time, this is Harper, and I am finally free.